buying seven-figure businesses and doing so successfully, what many call acquisition entrepreneurship. And this is, again, what I want to talk about in this video, how to successfully go out there and buy businesses. I'm somebody that's done it myself. I did my first acquisition when I was 27 years old, have done many more since. I'm now 32, and the businesses I've bought have provided a really nice foundation for my life. I've helped a lot of other individuals do so as well on my social media content, YouTube, like you're probably watching right here. And I work with people on the side as well. But that's not the point. The point really is, where do people screw it up, right? The dream is great. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to take my slice of the American pie and get the American dream. I'm going to go out there and buy this successful business and maybe do it repeatedly and build a portfolio and have this big exit, right? We've probably all heard of the upside and the opportunity, and it's sincere. It's real. It's there for the taking. Yet most people, let's just be really frank about it, most people don't get there. And I want to talk in this video about why. And I see a couple of, several patterns that are really obvious to me after, having watched a lot of people go through this process, some successfully, others less so, after having witnessed myself go out there and make a whole bunch of mistakes, but fail forward. And that's largely been what I've done over the last 4 or 5 years in this endeavor. And so let's just get right into it. The first thing I see, it isn't even about strategy or tactics. It's about communication. Most folks who don't have the success they're after, one of the key reasons why they fail is their communication lets them down. Now, communication, I believe, is overcomplicated. I see a lot of people who try to use big words they don't understand. They try to sound smarter than they need to, and they essentially overcomplicate the communication that's needed to be able to successfully buy businesses. I'm here to tell you that simpler is better. Simpler is better when it comes to your communication. The simpler you can be in explaining to a banker, to an investor, to a seller, to a broker, who you are, what your intentions are, and why you're in front of this individual, the better. Simple is better. And most people, they're using words they don't even understand because they feel like they need to sound a certain way, or they need to demonstrate themselves to be sufficiently well capitalized or smart enough or know the right people. And they're effectively just trying too hard. It comes off, it's obvious, and there's a breakdown that happens. And a lot of people get in this negative kind of whirlpool that they can't get out of. And then the more they kind of get trapped in this whirlpool, the more they stay stuck, and then they use bigger words to try harder. And it's almost the phrase, try hard, die hard, right? So that's a big one. And again, simple communication wins. I'll give you an example. Say you're trying to build a deal team, or you're trying to, bring on a lawyer to help you in your endeavors. A lot of people will say, my hypothesized plan is to, engage in acquisition entrepreneurship and consolidate the highly fragmented industry and bring, blah, 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 buzzword, 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 buzzword. Hey, listen, it's real simple. I see this opportunity. I want to take advantage of it. I want to buy businesses in this industry, build a successful portfolio, and I need help to be able to do so successfully. I know I can do this, but I know I can't do it alone, and that's why I'm building a team of advisors to help me. Right? Real simple. Look, we're going to be using SBA finance, seller finance, and third-party investor capital to finance these deals. Right? Hey, we're building this deal team, and with all of us coming together, we know that the sum of the collective will be stronger than ourselves as individuals. In other words, we're building a team so we can be successful. Right? Just simple. Hey, the stronger our team is, the more successful we'll be. How are you going to get the capital? Simple. SBA finance, excuse the ping there, SBA finance, seller finance, and investor capital. Simple. Right? Where are you going to find these deals? A combination of on-market and off-market. By cold calling and by looking on Biz Buy Sell and by building relationships with brokers. Simple. Right? Why do you think you can be successful? Because I'm never going to give up. Right? Because I'm the kind of individual that will not give up. I know I can do it, but I know I can't do it alone. That's why I'm building a team to help me in this endeavor. I'm giving you examples. I'm speaking broadly. For those of you that are new to this process, I have a ton of videos that get into the nitty-gritty and the details of a lot of the things I'm talking about. The goal is not as much for this to be about tactics and strategies. I have a ton of videos, again, that talk about that. I'm just trying to talk about where people mess up. I notice people are trying too hard with their communication. They're using words they don't understand, and they're losing their audience, and they're losing their credibility. I'd rather you talk like a fifth grader, but use words that you understand, that your audience is going to understand. That will get you a heck of a lot further. I've seen this so many times. Still staying on communication. It may seem unusual to talk about communication for so long in the context of buying businesses, but your ability to communicate who you are, what your intentions are, and what you're looking for in a way that people respond to is hugely important in this process. So I want to continue to talk about it. Next thing I notice is some individuals struggle with their tonality, their tone of voice, and they use the wrong words that indicate a lack of confidence. I notice this one a lot. They'll use "I'm trying to," or "we want to," or "I hope to," right? These words that suggest it's a maybe. If I get lucky, then we're going to do these things, right? It suggests something of a lottery ticket mentality. Hey, I'm going to buy the lottery ticket, and who knows? Maybe I'll make a lot of money. Want to join me? Right? It doesn't inspire confidence. Not to advisors, not to lenders, not to investors, not to brokers. None of them. We need to use strong language, sincere language, strong language. I intend to blankety blankety blank. We will blankety blankety blank, right? We will acquire seven-figure businesses in the logistics industry, right? We intend to consolidate the plumbing industry in the Southeast. I intend to acquire multiple seven-figure businesses over the next 5 years. Use words that suggest, not just suggest, that state your intentions, that demonstrate you have a sufficient level of confidence in what you're doing. I mean, let's level with one another for a moment. Just think about it from the perspective of a banker or an advisor or a lender or an investor. Any of these individuals you may be interfacing with. If you've never bought a business before, why should they bet on you if you're not even capable of using language that demonstrates your confidence in your own self or in your team? I mean, seriously, you have to ask yourself that question. It's always important to think from the perspective of the individual you're talking to, right? Always empathize with your audience. If you're not giving your audience a sufficient amount of confidence in what you're doing as an acquisition entrepreneur, then why would your audience want to reciprocate by helping you? You know, when I got started, I didn't have a lot of experience. I had no money. Actually, I had no business acquisition experience. I studied psychology in university, okay, not business. I worked in a family business, so I had some experience generally about business, and I understood generally how to sell myself, but I didn't have direct business acquisition experience. I didn't have industry experience. In other words, I didn't have experience in the industry that I was looking to make an acquisition in. And I was broke. I had no money. None. I was literally sleeping on my grandmother's couch. And then she graduated me into her guest room. Okay, that's where I was in my life at the time. But I understood intuitively that as a 27-year-old who was broke, that the only thing I had was self-belief, a vision that I could cast, that others could buy into, that they could get excited about, that we could all galvanize around to push on and move forward. And so I was very conscious about the words I used and the language I chose in my communication, in my speech. I spoke as if. I spoke with a tone of voice that demonstrated a level of excitement and enthusiasm, but also confidence and certainty about where we were going. I wasn't always right in every single action that I took, but I moved confidently in the direction that I, at the moment, thought was the best direction to proceed at any given time. And so these are the characteristics from a communication perspective, from a language perspective, and from a mentality perspective that I implore you to adopt. For many of you, you feel comfortable communicating well already, and that's great if you do. For others of you, maybe the communication piece isn't there as of yet. I recommend Toastmasters. Toastmasters is where you go and you'll get in front of small to medium-sized audiences and you get to speak in front of people and practice your public speaking skill. You'll develop it in real time in front of a live audience. They're very receptive. They're very friendly. It's a group that's meant to foster confidence in others and to help people build their communication confidence and their communication skills. So I highly recommend going to Toastmasters if you feel like you lack some of that confidence with regards to how you communicate. because you're going to need it if you're starting with no money the way I did. It just is part of what's needed. But when you communicate the right way, and by the way, communication skills can be learned. Take it from me. I used to be a very socially awkward individual, and I couldn't speak well. I couldn't talk well. I've developed those skills throughout my 20s and into my early 30s. You can do the same. Toastmasters really helped me. I've seen a lot of people develop their skills at Toastmasters. So that's an opportunity for you. But communicating in the right regard is probably the most important foundational piece to being successful in acquisitions entrepreneurship. Because if you can communicate that right way, and then if you actually speak to the points that matter to the person that you're talking to, then you'll start getting real results, right? So you're communicating confidently, you're using strong language, no trying. We're not trying, we're doing, right? We're using the right words, we're communicating in the right tone of voice, and then we're understanding our audience. And I'll talk a little bit about how to speak to different individuals in your business acquisition journey or your business acquisition endeavor. Because I can talk about the core interactions you're going to have, and what you say to a banker is going to be very different than what you say to an investor. What you say to an advisor that you may be wanting to bring onto your team for equity, that's going to be different than what you say to a broker. So let's talk about it. We'll go in the order that I generally recommend you follow when you're going out to buy your first business in the game of acquisition entrepreneurship, right? Probably you're going to start after you choose an industry or you decide what type of a business you're looking to buy. Usually the first step then is building a deal team. I've talked about this a lot on my social media platforms, and you can watch more videos about this, but I generally recommend an accountant, a lawyer, and an industry expert. The accountant should have auditing or general P&L understanding, right? They should be really able to analyze financials. Your attorney needs to be an M&A attorney, a business acquisition attorney. We don't need a litigator. We don't need the lawyer that sued O.J. Simpson for murder. Okay, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a M&A attorney, a mergers and acquisitions attorney. And then we're looking for an advisor that has a lot of industry experience in the industry that you're going to be making acquisitions in. So when I got into the plumbing business, I brought on somebody with 35 years of plumbing experience, right? So that's the deal team. That's really what I recommend. And you can bring these people on without paying them cash. I recommend in many cases giving them equity, a couple of points, a couple of percentage points in the businesses you're going to buy. I'll talk more, again, other videos, I talk more about that. But let's think for a moment about what an advisor wants if you're going to give them equity. If that's the carrot, if that's the incentive that you're offering, what do you think they want? What are they interested in? What matters to them? These are important questions to ask yourself if you're going to be a persuasive communicator. And if you're going to successfully persuade these highly qualified and highly competent individuals to join your team, then you're going to want to think wisely about what you emphasize to them. Well, let's ask this. Are they putting money into the deal? Usually no. That's not at least what I teach. So most likely no, they're not putting money into the deal. Okay, so what are they putting into the deal? Well, time, right? Effectively, you're saying, I'll give you equity in my deal in exchange for some of your time and your expertise. So in that regard, they don't have money to lose, but they do have time to lose, right? And you're not paying them in cash the way I talk about it. You're giving them equity. So in that regard, what do they really want more than anything? They want you to be super successful. And they want the equity that they're being given by joining you in the very early stages to become fantastically valuable, right? So then what's the thing we probably want to emphasize to an advisor more than anything? Of course, be honest and sincere, but what's the most persuasive thing we can say to that advisor? Let's talk about how we're going to build the biggest, baddest, best business this side of the Mississippi. Let's talk about building $1 billion enterprise, or at least $100 million enterprise. We are going to take over this industry and dominate and build a massive enterprise over the coming 5 to 10 years. That's persuasive. Why? Because you're giving them equity. And the way that equity turns into a meaningful, tangible value to this advisor is by you being super successful in your endeavors. So when it comes to speaking to an advisor, the very most persuasive thing you can say, in my opinion, other than them being bought in on you, and we'll talk about more about how to pitch some of this stuff, but other than you selling yourself, it's you selling the fact that you have a great plan, a great opportunity, you're the kind of individual who can get the job done, and all it really requires is the right team to get there, and then the execution. And by you all coming together, we can be successful. I know I can do it, but I know I can't do it alone. And that's why I'm reaching out to you, Mr. Lawyer, or you, Mr. Accountant, so that we together can build a massive, successful company. And I want to give you some equity so that you can be incentivized to help us grow this thing into the massive company that I know we can build and create by making acquisitions in the ABC industry. So that's really how we want to talk to an advisor. Now let's talk about a banker. A banker is very different. A banker is providing you debt, right? Those of you who understand finance a little bit understand that debt has no upside. It's just the principal plus the interest. You're going to repay the money that you've been given plus interest. And that's the deal. That's it. Whether you have a massive amount of success for your company or not, doesn't really matter to the banker. As long as you don't default on the loan, the banker's good. So do you think when you're talking to a banker, you want to talk as much about upside? Probably not. The banker doesn't want to hear about your billion-dollar endeavors. To be honest, that usually scares a banker. What a banker wants to understand much more so is that you have the risk management skills to make sure that you're going to always make every single payment in full and on time. That's what a banker wants. They want downside protection. They want to make sure they don't have to explain to the president of the bank or their boss why they gave you some loan that you were unable to pay. So the language you're going to use for an advisor is completely different than the language you're going to use to a banker. Your endeavors are the same. Your intentions are the same. But the parts of your business plan, let's just say, that you're emphasizing are quite different when you're speaking to the advisor than they are when you're speaking to the banker. It's kind of like if you go out, let's say you're a young guy, you're a 23-year-old guy. You just graduated college. How you talk to your buddies on a Friday night at the bar, is that going to be a little different than how you speak to your mother-in-law or your girlfriend's mom at Sunday morning for brunch? Probably so, right? The things you say to your buddies at 11 o'clock or midnight, in the middle of the night in a bar, probably a little different than what you're going to say to your mother-in-law at 10 in the morning. It's still you. Who you are hasn't fundamentally changed, but there's different sides of yourself. And how you present yourself to your mother-in-law, a little different than how you present yourself to your buddies at 11 o'clock at night in a bar. Okay, so this is really what we're talking about here, is understanding what your audience needs to hear for them to be comfortable enough to proceed in the deal-making endeavors with you. It's not lying. You're not full of shit. You're sincere. You're straightforward. You have big ambitions, but you also understand that you need to make sure you don't default on your debt to be able to achieve those ambitions. So you emphasize your prudence and your risk management skills to the banker, whereas you emphasize the upside and the opportunity to the advisor who's getting the equity. Speaking of equity, let's talk a little bit about investors. What do investors want? In my opinion, they want the best of both. They want the upside of a Silicon Valley startup, but without all the downside risk. And this is usually how I sell Main Street acquisition investment opportunities. The upside of Silicon Valley without all the downside, right? Here, you're actually going to make sure we don't lose your money, but you still have massive upside by investing in this business acquisition at this early stage, right? If you're raising your equity for your first couple of deals. So you can provide them a real amount of upside if you have this big opportunity that you're trying to achieve by buying businesses and building a portfolio in a given industry. But because it's a Main Street investment, the odds of the business going kaput, especially if you pick the right industry, are quite low, right? You pick an industry or a business that's Amazon-proof, that's AI-proof, that's going to do great no matter whether there's a Democrat or a Republican in office. You pick a business in a great market, a growing market, and it's pretty hard for you as somebody who's raising equity from investors to lose that investor's capital. As long as you manage your debt right, which is why it's important that you do stay prudent when you're growing through acquisition. But what we say to an investor is different than what we say to a banker, is different than what we say to an advisor if we're trying to bring that advisor on in exchange for equity. How about a broker? A broker is somebody who has deals. They have a lot of deals. Some of them are better than others. But what does a broker want to hear? It's not what a banker wants to hear. It's not what an investor wants to hear. And it's certainly not what an advisor wants to hear, who's being given equity. What a broker wants to hear is simple. that you have the ability to perform, that you will get a deal done if you make an offer and get that offer accepted. A broker wants deal certainty. Why? Because a broker only gets compensated once the deal closes. That's the only time a broker gets paid, and that's precisely when the broker gets paid. So, to be totally honest with you, a broker really doesn't care if you're successful with your business acquisition. They'll say they care, but deep down, from my experience, they're really not all that concerned about whether you're successful or not, which is why you have to do your own due diligence as an aside. Right? A broker is really only caring about one thing. Will the deal close? So you, in your communication to a broker, must emphasize and demonstrate your capacity to close the deal. That you're an individual based on your experience, your capital raising abilities, and your grit, and everything else you've got in your locker, you're somebody that knows how to close the deal. When a broker hears that, he or she is much more likely to give you better access to better deals, and that's what you want. But the way that you're going to get there is by emphasizing to the broker what he or she needs to hear to feel more comfortable in you, more confident in you. And that is, again, your ability to close the deal. Okay, so these are several really important points. I had a couple more notes that I wanted to talk about. There's one more that I think is really important. Generally, no matter who you're talking to, whether it's a banker, a broker, an investor, an advisor, there's really four things that matter, in my opinion. I have them written down here. I wanted to talk about it. The right people, in other words, the right team, the right opportunity, the right plan, and then the right execution. Those four items, if you can hit on all four of those items, you'll almost always really dominate, right? So for example, if I'm talking about making an investment in the plumbing industry, I'm going to say, hey, look, by myself, I'm nobody. But with the team we've built with Priority Utilities, whether it's our industry expert, our attorney, our accounting experience that we have on our team, or myself leading the team forward by finding a whole bunch of deals, we have the perfect team to be able to capitalize on what is indeed a massive opportunity to consolidate the plumbing industry. You have these great businesses that are recession resistant, consistent demand. They do great no matter who's in office. They do great no matter what the economy's like. And there's a lot of these plumbing businesses that are going for sale because all these boomers are retiring. Right? So far we've talked about we have the right team, we see the right opportunity, and now we're going to talk about having the right plan. Hey, we know that we have the right team to be successful in buying businesses in the plumbing industry. We know the opportunity is ripe. It's a great industry. There's a lot of businesses that are for sale and will continue to become, there for sale over the coming years. And we have the right plan of action. We understand how to use SBA capital coupled with seller finance and investor capital to raise the money needed to buy these businesses. And then we have the right action plan to be able to integrate these businesses into our portfolio after we close. The real question is, can we execute? And that's why we're reaching out to you, Mr. Banker, to make sure that we have the financing in play ahead of time so that when the right opportunity comes and we vet this deal and we make sure it's right, and we actually get really comfortable after doing a lot of diligence that we're able to execute and be successful and provide a great deal for you in your lending institution, and also, of course, be able to grow our portfolio with Bright Utilities. Right, so I just pulled that one out of my back pocket as far as a pitch or kind of a persuasive little communication. And really, I'm sure if I worked that a little better, it could be a little better. But what I'm really trying to articulate to you is if you're trying to make a compelling point and be persuasive in your communication, there's really those four items I really recommend you emphasize. The right people and the right team, the right opportunity, you're in the right place at the right time, you have the right plan and the right plan of execution. If you can hit on those four items, whether you're talking to an advisor, you're talking to a banker, an investor, or you're talking to a broker or a seller. We didn't talk about a seller. We'll talk about that on another video. You're going to do really well. You keep your communication simple enough to be understood. You communicate with a sense of certainty. You're not trying to do things. You're intending to do things. And you will do things. You'll be very successful. And when you speak in that way, you understand these key points we've discussed here. I really have a lot of confidence that you will be very successful in the game of acquisition entrepreneurship. With that, I'm going to sign out. If you want more information, go to jasonpaulrogers.com. If you want to invest with us, go to brighterutilities.com. And with that, I will talk to you in the next video. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And again, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.